Hey there, guys. I think we're right on time today, hopefully. Today I'm going to talk about something that's happening in Dorico for Dorico composers that may be causing some sort of unexpected effects. This is called playback overrides. And it's important to understand about this feature. There's certainly aspects of it that are very helpful. So I think by the end of this stream, if you're unfamiliar with them, you'll understand that they can cause you problems, and they're also really awesome aspects of what makes it possible for you to cultivate exactly the kind of playback that you want from your playback. Hey, Shubas, thanks so much for joining me. Yeah, you're just on time. I'm kind of getting the hang of this new setup, so starting to feel more confident getting on here on time. So essentially, playback overrides are settings that you can change on a per note basis in your project that will affect playback. Things like you can separate the notation duration. So it might look like a quarter note, but the playback could be less than that, or you can actually adjust it so the playback starts a little earlier. I'll give you an example of that here. You can actually enable this little view here, and then you can see the difference between the playback and the actual notation. So the sort of lines underneath are showing the notation, whereas these are showing playback. So you can actually change how the instrument is played back if you want them to play a little ahead of the beat, a little behind the beat, or maybe there's just a note here and there that you wanted to quantize, or you wanted it to have a little bit shorter playback, stuff like that. That's how you do it. Let me just also bring up my example for today. So the thing that I kind of wanted to talk about mainly today is a weird thing that happens when you either import MIDI or you even copy and paste it from one part of your project to another. The project or the playback overrides will actually be preserved in that situation and can cause some weird things. So the example I'm going to give you here is where I'm going to copy a little ostinato pattern from the violin to a glockenspiel. This is the kind of thing I do all the time in Dorico. I have a melodic or rhythmic idea that I want to put into a new tone color. I want to move it from, in this case, the violin to the glockenspiel, just to create interest while maintaining the integrity of the instruments or the compositional structure, right? So this happens a lot, and then, but maybe what was working in the violin in terms of dynamics, maybe mezzo piano was working really well on the violin, but on the glockenspiel it's too loud. So I want to bring down the dynamics. I bring down the dynamics with dynamics marketing at maybe piano or something, and I don't really hear the change. Or in the case of this example, you'll see that it does bring the volume down, but it actually doesn't change the sort of CC1 values, the dynamics that come from the really high quality sample libraries where there are different velocity layers. So let me just demonstrate exactly what we're doing. And if you have questions along the way, then please just pop them in the comments, and I will check them out when I'm done. Okay, so let's look at this little violin ostinato here that I've got going, and I'll just play a little passage of it. Okay, so it's just sort of a pretty standard violin part. We can see what we've got going on here with the velocity, and that's going to be important here because if we copy this and we bring it up to our glockenspiel here, and we paste it into our glockenspiel, we're going to get exactly the same velocities. Now, for both these very short notes in the violin and in the glockenspiel, my expression map is set up so that, and this is also an important aspect of how playback overrides respond. In my glockenspiel, I'm using note velocity as my primary dynamic. So that's the thing. Velocity of the notes is the thing that's going to go and retrieve the appropriate velocity layer from the sampling library, right? Now I've got a secondary dynamic of CC11, which is just handling 11, which is really just a volume. So if you've watched my channel and you've been doing orchestral programming for a while, I'm sure you're aware that you want to have both the dynamic layers change at the same time as the volume. Otherwise, it sounds less realistic because our ears are used to the fact that there are actually timbral changes. When you hit the glockenspiel harder, you get a brighter sound, you get a different set of harmonics within the fingerprint of that sound. The way that a French horn sounds when you blow hard into it is different than when you blow softly into it. So we don't want to just shape the volume, we want to shape the dynamics and the volume at the same time. The dynamics are being triggered here in my glockenspiel by note velocity, volume by 11. So what that means is that if I go in here and I decide, oh, my glockenspiel is way too loud, and that's just the nature of a glockenspiel, and I go in here and I want to set that to piano, let's say. Well, we can see here that in my CC11 lane, this gray line here, it has changed, and I'll just change it to a couple of values. If I were to change that to forte, you'll see that the gray line changes, and that's because Dorico's creating that CC11 curve for me based on the notes and based on my dynamics. But there's absolutely no change whatsoever in the velocity, which means I'm not getting any of my appropriate velocity layers. Essentially, it's inherited the velocity layers that would have worked on the violin originally, but it's not working for my glockenspiel. So how do I do this? How do I resolve this issue? And this is something that really had me tearing my hair out about 3 weeks ago. I was working on a film score and I had to get it out the door like that day. And no matter what I was doing to my dynamics, it was not representing correctly, right? It wasn't playing back properly. And it was an absolute nightmare until I sort of remembered somewhere in the back of my head, I had been watching one of Dorico's live streams months ago, and I remembered about playback overrides. So if you select these notes, I'm going to go back to a piano dynamic here. I'm going to select all my glockenspiel notes here. And I never remember where this is in my menu, so I just type in overrides and it shows up here. Reset playback overrides. So I guess we can see that that is under the play menu right here. Reset playback overrides. Okay, now what this is going to do is it's going to basically erase anything about the start times, end times. It's going to erase anything about the velocities. So check out what the velocities look like down here in the lower part of the screen. Check out how those change once I hit reset playback overrides. Okay, they changed quite a bit now. So now these are unique to my glockenspiel. Even though I copied it from the violin part, I didn't want to preserve the dynamics for the violin. I wanted new dynamics on the glockenspiel according to this piano forte or this piano dynamic. So now I have what I expect, which is I'm going to get the velocity layers on the dynamics that are appropriate to piano dynamic. And I'm also still getting the CC11. It's just that these are going to match up and it's going to sound way, way better. So then I have this outcome, which might be a little too quiet to really hear. I'm not sure how loud it is over the stream. But in a nutshell, that is the idea that playback overrides, resetting playback overrides, is the solution I found if there's any kind of dynamic weirdness where I copy and paste a lot in my work. I usually start with a sketch. I write out a basic sort of maybe 8-bar harmony, a melody, maybe a counter melody, a rhythmic engine, a few ideas, right? I sort of sketch them out, and then I kind of move them around on the grand score to different tone colors, all the while sort of maybe doubling things up. There's a lot of copy and pasting I do, and then I go through and I set up dynamics to try to balance the instruments. And sometimes that doesn't work at all because of this. So the best thing to do is after I do all that copy and pasting, and I've got sort of my collection of notes in the right places, more or less. Before I do anything with dynamics, because I won't be able to judge well, I go ahead and I select everything. Just hit Command All, and it selects every note on the staff, every staff, and then I hit Reset Playback Overrides. You also want to do this if you're importing MIDI. So if you wrote something in Cubase, for example, and then you import it into Dorico, you may want to do this as well, so that you can be sure that your dynamics are responding correctly. One last note that I will make on this, because I think it could definitely confuse some people. It really matters whether your expression map is looking to CC1 for dynamics, or note velocity, or CC11. Whatever you got set up, you have to pay attention to what's in your expression map as well. But just be aware that if the dynamics don't seem to be, conforming your dynamic settings, your expression map settings as you'd expect, or it's not sounding right, you got like a piano oboe and you've got a mezzo forte flute, and you still can't hear the flute, go ahead, select all the notes, hit Reset Playback Overrides, and 9 times out of 10 that solves my problem. I imagine it may solve your problem as well. So I'm just going to check out some comments here. Yeah, Babylon Waves is really good. It's not true, it's not true. So Rich is asking about using Babylon Waves in Cubase, Babylon Waves is really for Cubase, and using Cubase maps in Dorico. It's not exactly true that they won't work, but it's not a drag and drop. So what'll happen with Babylon Waves is they have already prefabricated all of the possible articulations and key switches and everything for you, and then you get to kind of draw them in. I like to select them from the little drop-down box that's up there in the info line of the key editor. That's how I personally like to do it, rather than drawing it in, because the drawing lanes get kind of hectic, especially for libraries that have a ton of articulations. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Once you've got the Babylon Waves expression map in Cubase, or a Cubase expression map that you've done yourself, you can import that into Dorico, and it does speed up the process, because what it's going to do is it's going to add all those articulations. And it does import things like key switches and such, but you may need to go in there and tweak some settings. You may need to go in there and set your primary and secondary dynamics on a per articulation basis. But let's say you bought a library. I don't have it, but I know, for example, Orchestral Tools recently put out that solo strings, and from what I understand, it's got articulations out the window. And so it's great if Babylon Waves does the job of making that long list. You got it there working in Cubase, and you import that into Dorico. You may still have to go and just check each setting in Dorico, but you are going to have that long list there. It's going to work, and it's just going to be a matter of you checking through them and making sure each one works. So that's how it's going to work for you if you're doing that. That's interesting, Shubis, that you say Babylon Waves is mostly wrong. I have had hit and miss experiences with Babylon Waves expression maps. I think, like a lot of things, you have to kind of, with these packages and sort of, the delight that comes from having a shortcut through something really hectic, like making expression maps. There's sort of that trade-off where it's almost always the case that what is prepackaged will only get you part of the way there. It won't get you 100% of the way there. In a case where I only have to make an expression map that's got, a dozen or so things, or in the case like I do a lot of channel switching instead of key switching, so it's highly customized, there's nobody offering that commercially, then it's definitely saves time for me to just do them from scratch, and I'm very proficient with that now. But if I were to buy a new library, or especially maybe a library I didn't use very often, I probably would go in for Babylon Waves. I do have Babylon Waves. I don't actually use it much. The main reason for that is that uh, Babylon Waves expression maps are designed for Cubase, and Cubase does not allow any negative delay compensation in the expression maps. I get that in Dorico. Dorico, I can say I want my staccato to play back, whatever, 60 milliseconds early. And that's really helpful when it comes to writing trailer music, for example, where things have to hit right on time. So I do almost all my composition in Dorico primarily because it supports negative delay compensation in the expression maps. So yeah, just looking at the other comments. Yep, Shubha, see your comment here about using the overrides and running into some issues there. Maybe this will open that door again. Yeah, if you know now that you can go back and you can reset the overrides, and it'll just reset it on whatever you've selected. So you can really craft a nice part on the violin, copy it up to your clarinet, and then just reset the playback overrides on the clarinet and start anew without having to notate all that stuff again. All right. Yeah, I imagine. So I guess, Shubis, you got the OT solo strings. I know those are massive. They sound great. They sound great in the demos anyway. I haven't really had a need for them, but I love OT's stuff. So anyway, I think I'll wrap it up there. I will be back on Friday. I'm going to talk about reverb on Friday, which is going to be really how you can add reverb onto your orchestral instruments, but not have it sound so soupy and washy. This is something that I really have invested a lot of time in recently because I was getting feedback from people that my tracks needed more reverb, and I just felt like, man, adding more reverb, it just got this it just kind of turned into this big soupy mess, this big blur. And I was scouring high and low and talking to some composers I know. Finally arrived at a really good approach for adding reverb, which is necessary, but having control over that so the instruments still sound really articulate. That's going to come up on Friday. So if you have any questions after the fact, post in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It's great. I love having this new setup. I feel like the videos are better. I know it's a little more leisurely for me to put them on, and I appreciate everybody's support. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on Friday. All right, take care. Bye.